Good morning, everyone. Day 3 of the JNUC. So, I am Tom Larkin, Senior Technical Account Manager at Jamf Software, and Facebook forced me to screenshot my Facebook page for my intro. So today I got Mike Dodge from Facebook. He's going to come out here in a second. He's going to talk about everything they do that encompasses the Casper suite and supporting Mac IT. So here's Mike Dodge.
Cool. Hi, guys. Hey. So, yeah, I'm obviously from Facebook. You've seen my T-shirts throughout the week, I'm sure. So, yeah, this is me. This is my profile. I'm a client platform engineer at Facebook. We mostly work on automation. Went to hacker school. Live in San Francisco, all the fun stuff over there. Spend a lot of time, just hanging out, going to bars, that kind of thing. Yep. Okay, so we're here to talk about managing the unmanageable in a hacker culture. I'm going to have a problem with that word today, aren't I? Okay, so here's the agenda. What is hack? Our launch daemon and init method. Code sync, which is another way we help manage our environment. Splunk and how we use it. AJ will be talking about that. And a toolbox that we've written for some of the tools that we give our IT staff and our users. So first, I just wanted to start out before I jump into it that this is my first JNUC, and it's been awesome meeting all you guys and the rest of the Jamf staff that I haven't had a chance to meet before today or throughout the week. And very excited to be here. Usually, I spend a lot of my time just kind of staring at a screen coding, but it's been nice meeting all you folks and meeting other people in the community, and I hope to be more involved going forward. So obviously, we all have the same challenge, right? We want to make sure that all of our machines are managed with Jamf at any given time. But we all have at least a few of those problem users. So, you guys probably have different words for them, but we'll go with problem users, right? And the ones that assume they know better, and in some cases maybe they do. They're engineers or very smart people that don't need to be patched on your schedule. They'd rather do it themselves, or they don't want you to be able to do X, Y, and Z without them knowing. So, and I've heard a lot of different things throughout this conference and before about ways to manage it, but within my environment, it's very unique in some ways, and one of them being that Facebook is a company that embraces the hacker culture, and we'll go over exactly what that means to us. But we also believe in moving fast and removing friction, any obstacles that stand in your way, and we encourage them to do this. Unfortunately, sometimes I'm the obstacle in their way, so we'll go over that. Okay, so to really understand what I'm talking about, I need to give you background on hack, right? And what our definition of hacking is, as well as what it means to manage an enterprise environment that embraces the hacker culture. I don't know if many of you know what hacking is or have your own personal definition of it. Some people automatically assume that it's juvenile criminals hacking government services, and that's not us, and that's not what we'll be talking about today. So what is hacking? I'm going to give you a physical example of hacking. Reason being there is a lot of people are confuse hacking with coding or computer science, and they automatically believe this is something that's beyond me. And it's not. It's a way to approach problems. I'm sure all of you guys do it in your day-to-day careers. There's something in your way, and you need to think of outside the box on how you're going to get there. That's hacking. So this is a problem. I'll give it to you guys. Here's a room at Facebook, at least a few years ago. At the time, we don't have offices. This is a conference room. But because we were growing at such a quick, fast-paced rate, we couldn't actually fit people out on the floor anymore. And we had to start absolving some of our conference rooms for workspace. Right here, there's 6 monitors on a desk, but what we realized is we actually need to try to come up with a creative way to fit 20 people in this room, right? So, I mean, look at it. There's not enough room. It's just physically impossible to cram 20 desks, 20 monitors in this room, right? So if we took any of you guys and put you in a room and said, hey, you know, give me a creative solution on how you're going to make this work, there's plenty of good ideas that you could probably come up with, but I assure you most of them would probably be something that we've thought about and ultimately bad, right? Like, you're not going to sit people on the floor. That's not going to work. You're not going to have people like sharing chairs or desks, and you know, we offer 30-inch monitors for our engineers, so they want the real estate, so you're not going to ask them to like downsize or any of that kind of stuff. So, oh, including time shifting, right? Like, we're not going to like have these people come in at this time, and this, yeah, wasn't going to work. So one day, actually at a hackathon, somebody solved the problem at a different dimension, right? When you walk into a room, you see length and width, and you're like, this is my square footage, right? And we all would approach that the same way, except you'd be wrong. This particular conference room had a vaulted ceiling. They solved this problem with height. They were actually able to put double the amount of people here and have a little fun with it as well. This is just one example. Another one was another team who also was challenged with the same problem. They were lucky enough to get 2 conference rooms. Unfortunately, they didn't have vaulted ceilings, so they weren't going to be able to, just build up. But these folks, not to outdo the other ones, decided that they could put a hole through a wall. Oh yeah, right? Of course, we didn't hire Kool-Aid to come in and do that, but they did. They put a hole through a wall. No, they didn't. Well, they didn't ask anyone, and they literally just went through this wall. And this is great for even just as a metaphor. You get in a room, you're surrounded by 4 walls, and immediately you say, if I know nothing else, that I am in this room, and it's within this space that I must operate in. But again, you're wrong. There's obviously ways to think outside the box or literally knock down obstacles in your way. Now, you're asking yourselves, really? You guys let people build lofts when they want or like knock down walls? And the answer is yes. Like, quite literally, if there's an obstacle in your way, we encourage them to remove it. Sadly enough, we give all these people admin access to their machines. So literally, quite anything that they deem as friction or an obstacle, we would encourage them to remove. We've built our entire campus around this idea. One of it is that, like, when we grew to this campus, before that we were in one building, and now we have about 9 or so. And in order to get from one building to another, we literally built a street with a fast lane. And we have bikes around the campus so you can get from one meeting room to another in a very short period of time. We even have people that will go around and make sure that they distribute the bikes equally at some times in case they don't all bundle up at one place. So another problem, obviously, this is something unique for us for the first time. We were going to be separated. Teams that work together very closely were now sitting in completely different buildings, each of them on different floors. So now we were faced with what we could only imagine would be less meetings. These teams would not be as fluidly working together, and it would stifle some of the collaboration that we've really worked very hard to enrich within our environment. So we built a bridge, right? So now when you're in building X and you're on the 3rd floor, to get over to building Y on the 3rd floor, you no longer have to walk down 2 flights of stairs, up 2 flights of stairs before you meet someone. Now you'll obviously just walk across the bridge. But we took it a step further. There's doors between the bridges. We even made sure that all the doors were automatic to just ensure that there was 0 friction in order to keep that culture of where you can just walk up to someone's desk and ask them a question. Quite literally, if I am trying to figure out something about our photos product, I can walk over to the photos team and kind of just shout out a question, and I'll get an answer. Or, ask them in their photo feedback group or something like that. So we've talked about removing friction, but we also have another saying within our company, which is move fast and break things, right? And for us, this is meant to be taken on a much longer timeline. I'm sure you I'm sure you guys have seen and noticed bugs in the site. We're not following this to as a directive to have things break. But when you're moving very quickly, sometimes it happens, and momentum is precious to us. And to maintain that momentum, we move fast and continually, because for us, it's a part of our company culture to move quickly and with speed, and that will cause breakages, but we're okay with that. If things break, we will adjust, make some changes, and move fast again. So I've heard some people recommend that self-service is a way to entice users to willingly allow you to manage their machines. And this works for a lot of people, and I think it's actually a really good method. We do offer quite a bit in self-service, not as much as I've seen with some of you. But really, this is just a carrot method, and if your users aren't really willing to be led, this won't work. They look at our self-service and they see a mousetrap. and for the average user, they would still get caught, but we don't have the average user. All our users are engineers, and they're not the average mouse, right? So they're going to go out of their way to figure out how to still get what they want and not have to be in your management if it's within their means, or if they feel that you're providing too much friction. Here's an example of something that we pushed out. I was very excited using Cocoa Dialog, if RX here. It was my brand new software updater that we branded as IT Updater. Internally, we have a sense of ownership over our laptops, so it'd be very, very rude of me to just push out something without telling everyone. So of course I post in our public or our private groups about IT and what's coming, and this is what it looks like, right? Telling everyone, hey, please provide feedback and let me know, anything I can do to make it any better. And of course, without a doubt, I'll always get a comment like this, which is Aaron telling me sudo Jamf remove framework. And if you'll notice, there's 273 likes. So I'm left with, well, shit, how many people actually type that in? And like, how am I going to deal with it? How am I going to deal with this? So we'll get into it in a second, but I have a way of re-adding Jamf even when they've removed it. But at this point, they're becoming aware that I know when they're removing it. So all they're doing is getting more creative. So then I get a post from David, and he found out that if I removed it, he'd re-add it. So what he did is he fixed it by changing the permissions on Jamf and Jamf agent to no longer be executable, and then file system locking it in such a way that even root won't be able to change it back unless you knew about it. So yeah, what now? Okay. So discover root cause. Why are these people removing it? We encourage them to remove friction and any obstacles in their way, but why? Do they deem like Jamf and the stuff that I might be pushing out as friction? What do we do about the users removing Jamf? Is there anything we can do, and how can we mitigate this? And then lastly, AJ will be talking a little about this. How can we identify who's removing Jamf? Because now we know who to reach out to and have the right conversations about, other than the people that are posting publicly. Who were the other 273 people that removed Jamf? Okay, so we talked about self-service and how that works for some environments, and I want to give you a quick example of why I couldn't do that. And because it's self-service, but they took it as letting them help themselves. So what they do is, well, at least a few, they decompile the Jamf binary. They found the username and password for the HTTP servers that we host on our distribution points, all the packages. So okay, now they can download whatever package they want and install it on their own. They get and we're offering the new hotness, but they also get a side of Jamf, because what they don't know, as soon as they install that package, we have all of our checks and everything put in place so that we'll be able to easily add Jamf back in. Okay? Timing. It's another good thing that we found over time, that when people remove Jamf, if we immediately put it back, obviously they'll realize, because with next push or whatever. So we've decided that we'll give them a little bit of a break. All of our processes are set up in place so that if a user does remove Jamf, it'll be at least about a week before it comes back, or unless something, a catastrophe, and then we'll make sure it comes back. And they won't see any other policies. And the reason why we did this is because we didn't want to start an arms race, right? They're going to come to my desk and shoot me with Nerf guns or something like that, or quite literally because they have unlimited amounts of time and physical access to the device. I can't, it's a losing battle on my end. Other hooks, so we're keep alluding to the other things that we have, and the one reason why it's been effective for us is because it's not documented, or at least until now. And this really helps because, like, today you search, oh man, how do I remove Jamf? On Jamf Nation, the first result is like exactly how to remove it. It's a great community. Not to bash on them, because I've went there for problems as well. So monitoring and detection. Again, AJ, we'll go over that. So launch daemon init is the method that I use. We use a few different launch daemons and launch agents that are all running the same script, passing a schedule variable to that script. And then within that script, we have something that would look like this, that is, if schedule equals startup or schedule equals weekly trigger, it's going to run the Jamf verify and report it to some logs that we're looking at, but also run the script. And this particular script will wait until they're on the corporate network and meet all the minimum requirements in order for me to first determine whether or not Jamf is working. One method that I've used is I use a manual trigger, and I call it is Casper up, and really, literally all it does is echo up. So then now I'm able to verify not if just Jamf is there, but is it functioning? Can I run a manual trigger? Because quite often well, not quite often, but there are instances that you will find yourself in where the binary's there, everything appears to be good, but then you go to try to run every 15 and it won't work. So I'm actually running the is Casper up trigger. Now, the reason why this is easy for me, or is what enables me to do things like this, is I have functioned all of my code out. Every function I've written, like whether it's installing Jamf, downloading the package, just the enrollment, it's all segmented out within its own modules or functions, and it all lives locally on the machine. And now I'm reusing code and moving very quickly, because I may have looked up how to change, X, Y, or Z, but it was like a year or two ago. So now, instead of remembering like the process that you would, dig deep in to do whatever you're trying to do, now instead there's this abstraction layer, and all I have to remember is I can call a function called install Jamf or verify Jamf, and it's very easy. So that's where we're going to get into the code sync mechanism that we've built. And this is kind of just a loose illustration of what we do. Say this is my laptop here on the bottom left, and I'm writing all this cool, fancy code. And then I submit it via Git and Fabricator, which is our code review tool, to teammates, and they review my code. They make sure, I have a valid test plan, that, I didn't do anything stupid, obviously. And then once I get the approval, it gets submitted up to Git, and then once it's in Git, we have something called pusher, which is really just a script that runs at a set interval to push the code from Git over to all of my distribution points. And once it's in all my distribution points, all of my client machines will pull down the code on different intervals. So I have local agents pulling it down every Tuesday. I have local agents that will pull it down on Tuesday. Plus, I have something called a prep function. Within my prep function is a ton of stuff. It's the bare basic for any of my scripts to run. And every single script that we have calls this prep function. So it's already setting up the logging for me. It's checking my kill switch in case something happens. I can instantly turn off any of the scripts that I'm running. It will download the code base. And the way it's downloading it is via an SSH key that I've scoped to only allow it to be able to use rsync down to bring down the latest code base on any of my laptops. And one other thing is now that the prep was called, it's also sourced all my functions for me. So now I'm not worried about, oh shoot, where did I put that file, or what file was this in? I just type install Jamf, verify Jamf for any of the functions that I would typically call, and it's available to me. So next, I think I covered everything. Yeah, so next, AJ will be talking about some of the things that we've done to monitor and identify what kind of users are removing Jamf and how we've done that in our environment. Here's AJ.
Thanks, Mike. How's everyone doing? Good? All right, so I'm just going to start off with talking a little bit about myself and then kind of go up, talk about Splunk and kind of how we use it. So about myself, I started off working in a Helpdesk role, and I did that for like a year or two, worked my way up to a Windows systems admin. I was a Windows admin for about 5 years. Got an opportunity to work for a company called Milestone, and from there I did, I started working with the Mac, fell in love with it, learned automation, learned a bunch of scripting languages. I worked actually with Jamf doing jump starts at various clients across the US. And then recently, within the last year, I've been working as a consultant at Facebook on the CPE team. And that's kind of where I'm at now. So quick question for you guys. How many of you have heard of Splunk? How many of you guys use it? Okay. How many of you would like to use it? Okay, that's awesome. Great. So when you come away today, you will have a good idea of kind of some of the stuff we do. So Splunk, what is it? It's a log congregator. So what does that mean? So what that means is that it's basically what we do is we tell all of our Macs and other devices to send their logs to one central server. And once they're on that central server, what we can do is we can actually go through and search and analyze data and find intelligence from it. It's based off something called the SPL language, or search processing language. And this is something that Splunk has created. It's kind of like creating MySQL queries, but it's using the syntax that Splunk has created. And we'll go over a few of those in some of the examples that I'll have up here. And here you're going to see some of the shirts that Splunk has, which are kind of cool. So put a photo of that here. And this is this slide's here to kind of just show and represent the topology of what Splunk setup looks like. I'm assuming that the back end is set up already, so that this is there. So on the bottom, we're going to have all of our Macs, and they're going to be sending their syslogs to what we call Splunk indexers. And from the Splunk indexers, we're at the top, we can do searches from the Splunk search head. So why would we want to use Splunk? So we can get more data-driven decisions, and we can also get real-time data. So a quick example of this would be if we send out a policy with Casper, we can actually monitor Jamf log in real time to kind of see like what's going on as we push out a policy. And we can see the numbers, either like our install counts increase or decrease on the fly. Culture, the culture at Facebook is very, very data-driven. So if you go into a meeting or someone asks you a question, you need to have data to justify your response. And so this is one of the tools that we use to get that data to show why we make a certain decision. Graphs and reports, again, we'll go over some more of these later on in a couple of slides, but we generate various types of graphs and reports in Splunk. We have one for like telling us like how many iOS 5, iOS 6, iOS 7 users we have. We generate a daily report. we give that report to Helpdesk, and then they can take action on it by upgrading those users to iOS 7 if we want to do that. And of course, if anyone ever comes up to my desk and asks why I did something, I can point them to the sticker that I got. So, how do you deploy Splunk? Well, if you have Casper, Jamf, it's really, really easy. And I'm going to go over the actual script that we use to deploy it on the next slide. It would just be an every 15 trigger with Casper. You would just push it out, and then the clients would get updated silently. There's a couple of options when actually putting the Splunk on a client. You have the Splunk forwarder, and we have something called syslog. So Splunk forwarder is Splunk's own log forwarding mechanism. The advantage of it is that when the Mac is off the network, it will actually cache logs, and then the next time it's on the network, it'll send them all at once so that you never miss anything. Syslog, what it does is if it's on the network, it's sending logs. If it's not on the network, it's not. So you could potentially lose some information. The choice you take here will depend on what your requirements are and if you need all the logs or not. In this example, I'm going to go over syslog-d because it is a little bit easier to go over. But depending on your requirements, you may have to do the Splunk forwarder. And in order to use syslog-d, we're going to have to modify syslog.conf because that's the configuration file for syslog. So this is the actual script that we'll deploy out in Casper. And very simple. So on line 4, we have add commands. And then you have star.star at Splunk indexer :port. Star.star means that we want to forward all roles, anything in syslog, to our Splunk indexer :port. So you would just replace that with your actual server and port of your Splunk indexer. Line 7 appends that value to the end of syslog.conf. And lines 10 and 11 simply restart the syslog daemon so that the changes take effect. And after we do this, we would actually want to go into Splunk and do a search and make sure that we're actually pulling information from our Macs. So there's another tool I want to talk about called Logger, which is built into the Mac. And what the Logger is it's a tool that we can use to write data to syslog. Once it's written in syslog, it can then be read into Splunk. So I'm going to kind of go over in the next slide what we can use it for with a simple script. But it's great because let's say if we have a script where there's tons of error conditions that can occur, like let's say we got an error where the user's not on VPN, user doesn't have enough hard drive space, user's not bound to Active Directory. We could actually use the logger command and write that value to syslog so that we can later get the value from with Splunk. And so when we use the logger command, so if I typed in logger -t CPE testing, what would happen is that in syslog, it'll make an entry like you see here. It'll have the time, date, my host name, CPE, which is the T, which is for tag, CPE, and then the value I write. So that I can write values to syslog in the format that it's expecting. So this is the example that I kind of just mentioned. We can have a bunch of different errors. So in lines 3 and 4, we do code that does something. We define a variable called error. If error is equal to no VPN, we log to syslog that there's no VPN. Or if there's no lack of space, we log to syslog that there's no space. So basically, we're writing to system log. Now keep in mind on this slide that notice the actual way that error is written. So it's error : no VPN, error : lack of space. This is going to be important for the next slide I'm going to show because we're actually going to do a regex so that we can variabilize this information so that it can be read in by Splunk. Okay, so this is the part where it's going to get kind of confusing, but just hang with me here. So this is the Splunk query I use. So with this Splunk query, I'm hoping to find all the information and based on those logs that I've written to find out how many errors I've gotten and how many successes I've gotten. So what this query is saying is find me any host, that's why it hosts a star, where the process is equal to my app. And remember, when I wrote the logger command, -t was my app. So now in syslog, it's only looking at those particular entries that I've written. And within that entry, find a regex where the value looks like error colon, and the next value there, put it into a variable called error, which is what you see there. And then it's going to do the same thing for success. Oops. It's going to do the same thing for success, and then it's going to do statistics on that. So in this case, I'm going to be doing a sum of success and error. So basically, what this is going to do is it's going to give me a report of all the different types of errors in my environment and counts of each. So I'll know basically, after this is ran, in my environment, how many people didn't have VPN, how many people didn't have hard drive space, how many successes did I have, and how many failures did I have. And then I'll know, like, for instance, most people didn't install this policy because a lot of people weren't on VPN. And then I can take action on that. Maybe I need to send an email or something like that to my users. This is another example that Mike mentioned. As you remember, he wrote the IT Updater, which is an awesome tool. And we're actually using Splunk with this as well. And the way we're doing this is that in Mike's code, when a user clicks a button, like install now, snooze, or details, we're actually using Logger to write that to syslog. So the syslog entry will look something like you see here, where details equals 0, snooze equals 0, install equals 1. What we're doing is each time a user clicks a button, we are actually incrementing the count. And then the query you see for Splunk on the bottom there, what we're doing is we're actually counting that. So we're counting how many times the user clicks snooze, details, and install. And again, we're going to be doing statistics on this as well. So what we can do at the end is we can say, okay, out of all my users, how many times did they actually click snooze versus how many times did they click details versus install? So I'm actually knowing what my users are doing without asking them to do anything. We're just kind of logging it in the background. So I think in this next slide, yeah. So this is what the reports kind of look like. In this case, I have 564 installs and 2,890 snoozes, which means my users don't want to get updates. So I know that a lot of users are just kind of pushing it off. So maybe I need to do something on my end to try to remediate that, So I know what my users are doing now. So another example that we use is stats on self-service. So what we do on this is that because Jamf writes its values to syslog, I can therefore read that value in with Splunk and be able to do any types of Splunk queries on it. So what we do is we're also looking at stats on self-service. So we can actually do counts on how many times users have downloaded any particular policy. So like for example, we know that like Wes recently updated our VMware package to 6. And within the last 30 days, it's been downloaded 94 times. What this also tells us is what people aren't downloading. So we know that, like for instance, Office 2008 hasn't been downloaded for like a year, right? We know that we can go ahead and remove that because no one's downloading it. In this way, we can kind of keep our self-service nice and tidy, right? We only keep what people are downloading and get rid of everything else. And this is like an example here of different counts and the different type of software. And we can see on the right the different host counts, distinct hosts that have that software installed. So if I was to click on that button, I would get host names. And I can do whatever I want to do with that. The other thing that I want to mention is that we're also getting more granular in that we're writing methods that we can do to find usernames and like locations of users that have this. So we can go like tell me all users in Japan that are on the second floor of building X that have this software installed. So we can do crazy queries like that too. Finally, this is probably one of my favorite ones, is the Jamf removal report. So you probably remembered Mike mentioning that we had a bunch of users that were going through and doing the sudo Jamf remove framework. Well, when you do that command, what happens is Jamf writes that to Jamf log. And because Jamf log is indexed by Splunk, we know when users are doing this. So with a simple query, I can search for the Jamf remove framework and command, and I can find the list of distinct hosts that did that. Because I have the distinct host now, I can go and I know who's doing this. And I can go, and when we get this, we try to go to the user, we try to understand why they removed it, so that we try to remove friction. If it's something we did, we just try to clarify that with the user, right? And so we have a method now where we can detect people that have actually did this. And next, I want to bring up Wes to the stage, who's going to talk about Toolbox.
How's everybody? Talking about moving fast and breaking things, right? I was really hoping I wouldn't fall. That was successful. How's everybody? Doing great? I just want to say thank you so much for coming to a session at 10 a.m. after the party. I probably wouldn't have done it myself if I wasn't speaking. But I just want to thank Mike and AJ, Joel and Tom from Jamf. Those guys are awesome. They help us out so much. And pretty much everybody at Jamf. Guys make our lives so much easier. So let's give a little round of applause for those guys, Jamf. Yeah. Anyway, I'm Wes. You don't really want to know a lot about me because well, you can find me on Facebook if you want. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our IT Toolbox. So Toolbox is, preface it a little bit. So we're managing the unmanageable, right? We sit at our desks up in a corner somewhere in some building, and we try and make things more efficient. We have a couple thousand users who are constantly breaking things. And when they break things, they go to our help desk and they go to our field support. So what we did, we're like, okay, let's try and make something that our tech guys can use to, be more efficient, fix things quicker. If it's a known issue, we can script it up real quick, take care of it instead of them doing a bunch of manual steps. So this is Toolbox. As you can see, it's a doc command. It's a bash script. It's got some Python in there, a bunch of fun stuff. So yeah, Toolbox. Why Toolbox? Kind of already covered that. Uses of Toolbox. And next slide, please. There it is. Okay, why IT Toolbox? Well, what happens when you have 273 users do sudo Jamf remove framework? Well, no Casper. Yeah, sad face. With Toolbox, we notice we can get really granular. So when you authenticate with Toolbox in the beginning, you can use your admin credentials that are locally on the box. You can use your domain admin credentials, or you can log in as the user. And when we do this, it gives us the ability to set different options a little bit better, especially if you can't use self-service because you don't have Casper. And offline, what happened to the internet? This actually happened once. The internet dropped at work, and we're like, oh, well, this isn't fun, especially for an internet company. When you run Toolbox without any internet access, you get very few options, but it still gives you the ability to run things locally because all of our code for Toolbox is stored locally on the machine. So it doesn't require an internet connection to pull packages or do anything like that. It's all local on the machine. And when you first open Toolbox, this is what it looks like. So as you can see, in the top, it's like day 80 admin account. C, current user is Shrek, by the looks of things. You can use the local admin account. And for instance, if you were to do the current user, of just any random user, you get about 16 different options. Fix user preferences. We had a lovely system preference bug, so there's a fix for that. When a tech's working on a machine, you can, sometimes they'll get up and they'll walk away. They're like, I want to go get a drink or, bag of chips. And if the screen locks, well, that's no fun. You can't do any work. If you, look around real quick, the screen locks by accident. You can install caffeine. And then one of my favorites is Casper check. So somebody comes up, I want something on self-service, but it's not working. Okay, well, let's see what's going on. So with Casper check, what we do is we check to see if we can run like a manual trigger on a policy. If it runs successful, then sweet, Casper works. If it doesn't, it automatically enrolls the quick add package that we have stored locally on the machine, gets them back up and going. But, you know, some people would stop there, you know, like, hey, I'm back on Casper, sweet. But, you know, when you have people constantly removing Jamf from their machines, we went ahead and we're checking to see if our launch daemon init method is on the machine. If it is, well, something's wrong. So it'll automatically send up a report to us so we can investigate why we're not adding them back on. And one of the first use cases we found out is, hey, I'm going to chatter the Jamf binaries. So that was one way we found that out. And I'll give you guys a quick look of what it looks like if a tech logs in. So as you can see, I've got 25 options now. So one of the things, like we get a loaner at a help desk, it'll come back in and it'll have like some user accounts on it. You just plug in the toolbox, delete local user accounts. Go within, clean it out, and the only thing left on it is the user account. And one of my personal favorites, which we threw in just recently as a little Easter egg, option number 2, get a little board, Nyancat. Terminal version of Nyancat. Pretty funny. But all right, that pretty much covers that up. I'm going to have Mike and AJ, you guys there somewhere? Perfect. Sweet. AJ?
Yeah, sure. So takeaways. So we covered a lot of stuff, and there's a couple of things that we want you to take away. So data is powerful. We talked a lot about how we use Splunk and the types of things we're doing. We just really recently started using it. We haven't been using it for too long. So we'd love to see, you know, what our colleagues out there are doing with it. We'd really like to push this field because I think it's a new part of IT, and it's something that we really want to build. So we really want to open up those relationships with you guys to get that going. And we mentioned our environment. And our environment may not be as extreme as some of your guys' environment, but I'm sure we can all agree that we all have at least a few people out there that are kind of breaking the rules, trying to get admin access and stuff like that. So what we want to showcase to you is like the types of things that we're doing in our environment to try to mitigate those types of users and being able to identify them.
Yeah, good code scales. We spent a lot of time building a really, what I would consider a really strong core function library that we use over and over again. And we started out at about 1,000 max, and we've scaled it up very easily, thanks to all the work we've put in there, to about 8,000. And every day when I go to reuse code, it's just a major win. Just to reiterate on that hacker's point, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, yeah, I'm lucky I don't have one, if you look hard enough, I bet you have at least a few.
And last but not least, Nyancat.
All right. One more? Okay, so hopefully with everything that we gave you, it's not like really so much as something that you're going to be able to take home with you right away. We didn't give you code or anything yet. But hopefully some of the processes that we've used, you'll be able to take this in your environment and ask, how can I apply it to myself? Next. So we plan on making some of the in-depth notes of what we did available with the discussion for the thing, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to give code, but I'll give out as much as we can. We have our own Facebook group. It's called the IT Thinktank. We encourage all sysadmins to come join, talk about anything that you found. We've also recently met the MacBrain guys that are out here in the audience, which are awesome and are doing some meetups, and would like to contribute to theirs as well as Jamf Nation, but we just haven't had a chance until recently. So now, any questions We also have some prizes for the best one, so. Okay, you're first.
What are the points of friction that you're running into that's causing them to remove Jamf framework?
Well, it's perceived friction, right? Like we go out of our way to do, let's repeat the question. What are users perceiving as friction and why would they want to remove the Jamf framework? Well, like I said, it's perceived friction and that is subjective to the individual user. The fact that I'm prompting them at all, even after telling them, is enough for some. For others, it's like, well, shit, no, I ran out of snoozes, so screw this, like, you know, I'm gonna remove it and do it on my own time. Of course, the whole reason why they got prompted in the first place was because they had patches that needed to be applied. So, you know, and we work with them. And that's just one example. There's plenty of others. That's the biggest one. Any little type of like prompting or anything doesn't really fly very well. We're trying to make that work within our environment, and I think it's starting to, but it's a battle that we've been facing.
Resources you discussed, have you used any of them for licensing, that sort of thing?
Resources?
Like Splunk and some of those.
Oh,
So the question was, have we used any of the tools that we mentioned in our presentation to do monitoring of licensing and stuff like that? And the answer is no, we haven't. We've been mostly using Casper to do some of the licensing stuff, mostly for us.
we have done some fun stuff with licensing. We wrote something internal that we call App Reaper. So we went through Adobe products and we install it for anyone that wants it. But we went through and did an audit to see who hadn't used it in the last, and I don't remember if it was 30 or 60 days. And we prompted them, again, more friction. And we told them just, hey, you haven't used Photoshop or Dreamweaver. It costs this much to the company. You know, if you'd like, you can click this button and remove it. And even that was like, you know, a lot better.
Is there a way to look at that code?
I will try to at least write up the method that we did. If not, then I'll make anything I can available. Okay. Go ahead.
So if you've got this hacker culture, how do you protect your code base that you say is local on all your stations so that they don't
Yeah.
And as a follow-up, aren't they going to start killing your Splunk forwarders too? Because I logic out you're using Splunk because they kill Casper, so you can't trust Casper inventory. But what if they start seeing Splunk sending all this traffic in and they want to kill that too?
Okay. So first, you asked, we're in a hacker culture. What's preventing them from messing with our local code base, as well as any other third-party tools like Splunk? Okay. So first, it's kind of cool the way we're using the code sync that we've written. Before we run any code, well, first it's written down to root, and I mean, only people that have root access can mess with it, right? But even if they did, because they do and they can, my code will first run a built-in DLib, running an rsync from the server down onto the machine, replacing any changes that they've made, because it does a delta. So, and it's been fairly well. We haven't seen people get that far yet. As far as the Splunk forwarder, it's relatively new in our environment. You're right that if people were removing it, would we know? We're not currently looking for it today, but I'm sure I can figure out another way to do it.
Yeah, so
Oh, there you go.
What we're doing on that is if they decided to remove the Splunk forwarder, we have extension attributes that check for it. We have extension attributes that check to see if the Splunk service is running or not. If it's not running, we turn it on.
Oh, yeah, they'll get picked back up.
And again, if they remove it, we can see it in Splunk or in Casper. So they're kind of like checks and balances. If you remove one, we can check for the other. So we kind of use that mechanism there.
If it's the hacker culture, how common is it that people actually reinstall the machines?
Oh, good point. So why aren't they just re-imaging their own machines? There's definitely a few that have went that route. And there's a few that are like untouchable because they're on Linux today, and we plan on supporting that. But okay, so as soon as they do that, now they have to completely support themselves. They kind of want the best of both worlds. If they're going to get on our VPN, if they're going to get on our corporate network, if they're going to get there are like a barrier of entry that is fairly steep in order to actually have a functioning machine within our environment. So they kind of need our image. They could do it on their own. I mean, they're all very smart, but I think that's just little within what they're willing to do in order to be unmanaged. Marco? Okay. Anyone else? Cool. Yeah.
You guys talk about if you want to punch a hole in a wall, you guys go ahead and embrace that. If I punch a hole in a wall, we have meetings for weeks.
Yeah.
Meetings about meetings.
Yeah.
How do you guys embrace that type of culture? Who pays for things? How does it start out? How do you get a budget for that?
Yeah, okay. He asked about literally punching holes in the wall and that sort of environment. How does it, is it sustainable? It's a good question. I think part of it is that everyone we hire and that we bring in is either they're very much already have that sort of mentality, but are mature enough to handle it like in some regards, or they're indoctrinated within our culture pretty quickly, and we do a very good job of onboarding everyone that comes in, and you know, it's kind of coin the term that everyone give them a big, you know, gulp of Kool-Aid kind of thing as they come in, but we have a team dedicated to making sure that the onboarding is indoctrinating them within our culture and providing that same good culture that we fought so hard to create in the first place. And we started out as like a startup, which, I mean, some people still consider us. We like to think of ourselves as still the startup kind of vibe. And we're willing to fight for it too. So there's checks and balances. If I went because out of anger and decided I'm gonna go punch a hole, like, yeah, I might end up in the HR office, but like if I actually had a reason, like I'm gonna build space, and if I don't ask anyone, then there's no one to tell me no, then like I might get away with it. In the back? Yeah. Okay. So, sure. So she's asking about how does compliance work in our culture? We definitely have some compliance things that we need to deal with. We certainly are able to meet any of them on, you know, any given machine. Like he said, we know who's removing it, and then we'll reach out to them and ask them why. We've been slowly like narrowing this scope of people that were within that funnel, and we're making it very smaller. We also do something that isn't quite related but very similar. Everyone is very security conscious within the company. They're very smart people. So on their own, if I didn't tell them, there's many of my users that would already be encrypted. There's a lot of them that would already remove Java when they saw that for 0-day come out. So the same people that are removing it are in compliance, and it's probably on their own, and they're probably much better locked down than what we would even recommend. And then something that our security team does, they're awesome. This month in particular is Hacktober. Our internal security team will hack our employees and raise security awareness. They do things like drop USB sticks on the floor with you know, safe malware to infect our users to get reporting. So we know like who is susceptible to these sort of attacks, and we do a good job to make sure that, you know, people are conscious and aware of the things that they're doing and why they're vulnerable.
So to elaborate just a little bit on compliance, it was probably like, what, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, it became mandatory that you needed to be encrypted.
Yeah.
So at first it was just like, please encrypt it. And then people weren't doing it, so we're like, okay, this isn't a joke anymore. You need to become encrypted. And that's when we noticed that some people just weren't doing it. And we basically wrote a brick machine.
Well, before you get there.
Yeah.
So yes, we wrote an encryption process to first encourage them and prompt them and do that route. But then we noticed that people were still not encrypted. So then we actually started targeting the users, understanding who they were, and sending them a friendly email reminder. And when they still didn't reply or do anything, we created them internal help desk tasks and they can just go in and close them, right? So they did that, and when we still noticed that they weren't encrypted, we started just emailing their direct managers, asking them, hey, like, managers, these are your reports that aren't encrypted. We really need this, to happen. Can you have a talk with them? Can you help us understand why, these users don't want to be encrypted? And then from there, things got real when we basically just, our security staff, some of the executives supported us. We said, if there's a machine in our environment that's not encrypted, it will not work. We would brick the OS so it couldn't boot.
And we're obviously, if it's managed by us, obviously if they've re-imaged, their own image, then we have no control over it.
Yeah.
But if they're under our management and they're not encrypted, then computer no worky.
Yeah.
As you give your users admins and you trust them and you do a lot to stay in compliance, there's still this cultural issue of like IT is this unknown thing.
Yeah.
And I can ask my friend.
Yeah.
And the friend is the well-trusted known person that can help me to fix my computer, do the stuff.
Yeah.
So if I would be a friend of a Facebook employee, I would have crazy ideas what I would do.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so he's asking about how do I handle users reaching out to friends to potentially help them with IT stuff? Okay, so hopefully some of the things that we've already done with Hacktober and other stuff to bring security awareness would help that. But also, we take it from a different stance. We actually wrote our own AV software internally. I can't go into like how much yet. I'll double check for the security talk. But basically, our frame and how we look at this is if someone were to do something to a machine to compromise it, we're more worried about intrusion detection, being able to identify that there's been a compromise, and then having fast response times in order to mitigate that, than locking it down in such a way that they can't work, but they're secure. So, Sweater? Yeah.
So data, what's the footprint, like what's the cost overhead of your Splunk implementation? You've got 2%, 5%, have you noticing if it's taking more performance?
So the question is in regards to CPU Splunk utilization because of the
And
Splunk
storage.
the Splunk forwarder being used. Yeah. So in our environment, like we're actually not using syslog, but we're using the Splunk forwarder. In terms of the utilization, I haven't like measured it like to the T, but it's not high. It's not enough to really cause like a significant amount of user impact. We just have the process start when the system boots up, and again, it's just sending logs, so it's not a lot of high CPU usage at all. So.
And part of it is, like in terms of the client side, there's very little, like you said, but in terms of infrastructure, we're lucky enough that our security team has highly invested in this product, and we use it very heavily. So we're just a drop in the bucket compared to all the stuff that they're doing. So you had a question, and then I'm going to take these two, and then you back there. Yeah.
Regarding your functions
Yeah.
that you've been writing,
Yeah.
I've been trying to do the same thing in my environment where I just have like a long list library of well-tuned functions. My process has been pretty poor. It's just in a text document that I'm on my workstation. If I need that function, I search for its name, copy and paste it, and send it off that way. Give me some advice.
Okay. Never copy and paste. Oh, sorry. But he asked, what would I do in terms of optimizing my workflow for the way he stores his scripts? He has a text file, and he often copies and pastes. That's perfectly fine. But when you want to go change that function now, you're going to have to update it 20 different places. You have to ask yourself every time you go to copy and paste, like, should I? And usually the answer is always no. If you can store it locally and you have the time to build something similar to what I did, I'll post how to do the single SSH key to only do rsync, that kind of stuff. Keep your stuff up to date. But using Git to check all your stuff in, being able to do like git grep and then remember where that function is stored and like how you use it has been really powerful. So if you start looking into tools like Git, Fabricator, Fabricator does code review for your team, you start storing your code in the Casper shares for your distribution points, and then you find your own mechanism for bringing it down. It could be as simple as like a zip file that you download before you start calling stuff, but I would do something like that.
Yeah, we got time for one more question.
Oh, one more?
Yelling at us.
Oh, sorry, guys. I said I'd go over here. Yeah.
What users that remove Jamf for the other thing, what did you find is most effective, either in changes that you made or discussions you had with them, if you got them to put it back?
Okay, good question. He said, what things have I found that were effective in getting people to, or installing Casper back, or having conversations with them to ensure that they're managed? So that's a really good question. Launch daemon init has been evolving for quite some time, and the Jamf verify stuff that I've been doing has been evolving. If I do hit a removal, I'm at like 98%, right? And the 2% that I don't have, I now have exceptions, and I know how to, like, I'll start looking at, like, okay, well, what does this error mean? And it's all logged, so now I can, without actually talking to them yet, I can understand how they were able to break it, what's the fix, like file locking a file or something like that. But before I implement it, I talked to them, I realized, and one of them happens to be a good friend of mine, so I approached him, and I asked him, I see you removed Jamf, and he's like, oh yeah, it wasn't working for me. I'm like, okay, let's go into why, and he, you know, he's, at this point, he knew it was coming, because this is the kind of things that they would expect from us, and he was like, well, I didn't like, you know, X, Y, and Z, and like, again, anything that he would have seemed as friction, right? If he's going to a meeting or whatever, some of these engineers are very smart. They know exactly where to go. So he nuked it. He had to give a talk. He didn't like the way my prompt overlaid. He didn't want to have to worry about whether or not it would come up. I was like, well, shit, okay. Now I'm going to have, okay, I won't prompt if Keynote's open or PowerPoint now. So, okay, worked it out with him. And now, not only that, I already knew the fix, so I didn't even tell him, but he's now managed again. So, okay, also, in terms of how fast we can iterate, we are extremely nimble because we're relying on these things that we've already built, and we're just becoming more and more efficient with the stuff we write. And a great example is this same engineer, when he finds something he doesn't like, because he has access, and this goes back to Marco's question, but he left, was transparency. He can look at all my code. He can actually submit diffs and help me improve it. And we encourage them to do it, and they have. So it's been really nice. And I think that's it. So.
Yeah, so every session is tied to a discussion in Jamf Nation. So any more Q&A you have for these guys, just go to Jamf Nation, find the session, and start a discussion based on this session, and then hopefully they'll come back and answer more of your questions.
Also, if you see us walking around, please, we're not afraid to say hello. We're social people.
I have a prize. So do you want to come up too? I have a prize for both of you guys.
Yeah.
You want to grab one?
And also a few announcements. Lunch again. You know, please be mindful. We got 2 lunch sessions. You know, we can't feed everybody at once.
Cool.
Again, there will
Here,
also
arm
be
yourself.
a Nintendo Wii Mario Kart tournament in here.
Arm yourself.
During lunch, you're more than welcome to attend. You cannot eat or drink in here, though. So, and thank you.